Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasting.
California has the largest population in the United States and the site of some of the most famous true crime cases in history. But there's more than meets the eye to the crime in California. Join Sean, Jessica, and Charles on the California True Crime Podcast as they cover crime both infamous and overlooked from around our state, while looking at the deeper history that goes beyond beaches and movie stars.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his way.
Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders Memorial Day Edition.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey Dylan, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
You had a couple of days off?
Couple of days off.
You feeling refreshed, relaxed?
My knee stopped hurting just in time to go back to work.
So your knee can hurt again?
Yup.
Nice. Yeah, that's always fun.
How are you?
I am just dandy, Dylan.
Well, that's good.
Being back in the studio always puts a smile on my face.
I know.
Even as we remember the fallen today.
Yes.
So, don't forget the true meaning of Memorial Day.
Yes, it is a big deal, and we have to keep the friends and family of the fallen in our hearts because some people sacrificed all for us to be able to have freedom. I mean, not even being funny. That's what it's all about.
Amen.
That's right.
Don't shout the men down. All right, Dylan, before we get started, let's give a big shout out to our newest patron, Michelle. She is sponsoring today's episode. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. You're responsible for everything that Dylan does in this episode.
It's a big responsibility, Michelle. I hope you are ready to carry that with you.
You're so lucky.
Also, if you're thinking about joining Patreon, it's a good time to do it. Patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast. This weekend, we dropped a brand new Patreon exclusive episode on the Lauren Giddings case.
Yes, what a wild story.
Very sad story. Strange.
Strange, for sure.
Some strange elements in that story. So again, if you feel like signing up at Patreon, it's a good time. It's we're about to get into the summer months. Maybe you're going to do some traveling. While you sit on the beach and relax, you're going to want to listen to some podcasts.
Tons of extra content.
There's a lot of, there's like 6.5 years of content at Patreon.
The ad-free experience on all episodes, and you can join us in our little Discord fam if you like.
Absolutely, Dylan. Before we get started, speaking of vacation spots, I just read that there was a mass shooting investigation underway in Horry County at Little River, which is, I guess there's a boat ramp there. And 11 people were transported to the hospital after this shooting.
Oh, God.
It's about 20 minutes from Myrtle Beach, or what we're now calling Murder Beach.
I believe someone posted this in our Discord, and 11 people injured.
Yes.
I mean, that's crazy.
According to the news report, people were being transported via ambulance, but also private vehicle. Scary stuff.
I mean,
I'm sure it's, holiday weekend and folks were probably just out maybe trying to have a good time. And then something like this happens. You just never know where or when there could be a mass shooting. I mean, it's a frightening world that we're living in.
I just don't understand the people that get mad when people are out just trying to relax and have fun. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. It's almost like the fast food murders that we've heard of recently. I believe last midweek we discussed a fella at Popeyes fast food who pulled a gun on his coworker
over the
he
biscuits.
burned the biscuits.
Yeah.
Then there was another story recently. out in the news about a young man who worked at a Checkers restaurant, which I've never been to a Checkers.
Checkers is good.
What is it, like just burgers?
Burgers, fries, shakes.
Okay, so it's just like the typical fast food place.
Yeah, but Checkers has a great seasoned fries. Checkers is the bomb.
Oh, okay. See, I've never been to a Checkers. We'll have to find one. Who pulled a gun on a customer and maybe, I think, shot the customer because the customer wanted extra mayo packets.
Doesn't even.
And I'm also like, why you got a gun in your waistband at Checkers?
That doesn't even sound real. You know, if you told me that, I would believe that you're making it up and it's not real. Not real
I've
life.
never been so emotionally invested in condiments that I'm going to pull a gun on a customer. They're not your condiments. Like, just give the person the fucking mayo. What do you care?
Gosh, you got these people who get so mad about at their job. You're just like, damn. You know, maybe find another job or something if it pisses you off this much interacting with people.
And if your job's so dangerous you have to bring a weapon to work, maybe you should find a job in a better neighborhood.
But yeah,
I don't know.
Well, let's be honest. If they're shooting someone over a condiment argument, they're probably the dangerous element in the store.
I just don't get this like lack of impulse control that seems to be widespread in today's world.
Do you think like it's connected to the changes in human behavior connected to the internet and just the internet culture?
In some ways I do. I think that we have been heavily desensitized.
Right.
We've lost the human connection because we are living our lives so online, as they say. You're lacking empathy for others. You're disconnected. You don't really see the humanity in people.
I think you also lack consequences online.
Oh yeah, you can say or do whatever you want on the internet.
You can do
What's the worst that can happen? They ban your account for a couple of days.
Right, and I think maybe that's bleeding over into the real world.
It'll be interesting. I'm sure there will be studies. It'll be interesting in 20 or 30 years when we learn the consequences of social media and living life on the internet.
Man, the 2020s have been some shit.
Yes,
God.
Absolutely. Can we go back like
Damn, it makes me
before like 2012?
It makes me pine for the early 2000s, and I had many problems with the early 2000s, namely a lot of music genres and the fashion.
You had a problem with the fashion of the early 2000s?
Well, yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible. And the kids love it. The kids love it today. And it's just so gaudy.
But gosh,
I mean, how many layered tank tops can you wear at one time? That's what I'm asking. All right, Dylan, we have a case that is out of the Norfolk, Virginia area.
Okay, taking it back to Virginia.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
Let's get into it. Vincent Tyrell Parker was born on June 13th of 1999. See, we are taking it back to your favorite time period.
Oh, my gosh. At least things were a lot chiller.
In Norfolk, Virginia, to Wayne and Carol Parker. Wayne was a heating and air conditioning service repairman who operated in and around the city. Wayne's family lived in Wilson, North Carolina. Carol was from Elizabeth City, North Carolina, but had spent 35 years in Virginia working for Dominion Energy, which is a power, electric, and natural gas company headquartered in Richmond. Vincent was Wayne and Carol's only child, and they had him later in life. Wayne was 39 and Carol was 41 when their son was born. Now, I think there's something to say about having, young parents, but there's also something about having older parents that are more established and mature.
Yeah.
Stable.
Well, I think there's a lot of good qualities that come along with, I know I would have been a better parent, later in life, if you will.
Absolutely. I feel like right now we're at a place where if we had kids, we would know what to do, maybe.
Well, you
be better.
Yeah.
Be better at this whole thing.
Just comes with like you
maturity.
Said, stability and experience, and just you're a lot calmer. Your life's a lot more chill, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. They were active members of the Baptist Church and maintained connections to Carol's family's church in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Vincent's cousin, Morgan Watkins, recalled Carol driving to North Carolina nearly every Sunday to attend church with her family. However, Wayne rarely joined his wife and son. So I'm not really sure with the details if Wayne kind of did his own thing, went to his own church, or maybe why he didn't attend church with his wife and son. But for those who are curious, Elizabeth City and Norfolk, it's not that great of a distance.
So they're right next to each other?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe an hour, hour and a half or something. So it's not like they're driving for hours and hours to go to North Carolina. It's not that far away. As devout Baptists, Wayne and Carol brought Vincent up amidst traditional Southern conservative values. They were seen as inflexible, particularly when it came to anything that clashed with their Christian views. There weren't many activities that Vincent was permitted to do as a child outside of school and church. Sports and other extracurricular activities were banned in the Parker household, and Vincent got into trouble whenever he tried to pursue hobbies like art or music.
Damn.
Even the types of toys he played with were limited to educational toys. He was never allowed to have things like action figures or video games.
Now you're telling me that God don't want you to draw?
I'm not clear on what exactly God wants for your hobbies.
Apparently, he doesn't want you to have any fun.
I mean, I don't know. I see, groups where like kids are skateboarding for the Lord, boarding for the Lord.
Yeah.
There was like a Christian skateboard club back in our hometown.
Well, you have the rock bands nowadays, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are activities that are kind of focused around religion and church.
So, kidding aside, it sounds like they have a very strict religious view on everything in their life, which is their right to have. But it seems pretty, I don't know if that's more along the fundamental kind of, you hear about these branches that are holding on to kind of this old mindset in religion in the modern day, which is it seems a bit weird to me, but people get to love the Lord the way they want, right? That's what I'm trying to say.
Amen. Amen, Dylan.
You love that Lord. You love the Lord the way you wanna.
I mean, have you ever known people who were like this or raised their children in this kind of atmosphere? I know there was a period, my dad and my stepmother were a member of this very Southern Baptist church, very conservative type of church. And while they were attending this church, their views on certain things seemed to change. Like, for example, my younger brother, and we have a big age difference. I mean, there's an 18-year age gap between my brother and myself, my half-brother. So I was an adult, when he was a little kid. But they were very strict at the time about, like, letting him watch Harry Potter movies or reading Harry Potter books because the church had a pretty strong stance on Harry Potter.
Right, and the witchcraft.
Because of the wizardry and the witchcraft,
right.
Yes.
I haven't known anybody personally, but I do know that the Harry Potter thing kind of spread around in churches. It surprised me a little bit that they were that bothered by that series of books. But, yeah. I've known of it, but I've never known anybody who was living in a household that was this strict.
Well, that was just one example. There were quite a few other things at the time.
Dude, the Harry Potter just like blew the lid off.
Yeah, I remember around the same time I was working at our local newspaper, which there are only 2 in the county. And I was working at one of the newspapers, and there was a church out in a rural part of the county that was holding a book burning.
Right.
Where they were burning Harry Potter books, among others.
That's pretty,
and they like put an ad in the paper like inviting people to the book burning, and there was going to be fried chicken.
But make sure
book burning.
You buy a copy of the book.
So you can burn it.
So you can burn it. Well, look, I got to say, just the image in my mind, the image of a pile of books, honestly, no matter the books, set on fire, I find is scary.
I agree.
I think it represents something, even on a subconscious level, that just really gives me the creeps.
Yeah, it's icky. It's icky. And I agree there are certain books that perhaps, in my view, do not belong in like the school library.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say, yes, this child should have access to 50 Shades of Grey, and it's their choice whether they read it or not. I mean, Come on. There are limits in my opinion, as a parent, what I would want my young children to be able to access. But I don't want to deny other people the opportunity to read whatever books they want, right? So it's your job as a parent to make that decision for your kids or to help steer them in the right direction. But you don't have a right to enforce what other people read.
No, and that's a whole nother conversation.
And burning books is part of that. I just think it's gross.
Well, it just is very Orwellian to me.
Yeah.
It's very control, just, not allowing people to make choices. The way I see it is if you don't like a book, don't read it, buy it, support the person that made that book. But I don't want to stop my neighbor from having that same book. I mean, it's very weird.
Exactly. So back to our story. I know we got off on a tangent there. Wayne had been an athlete growing up and was a member of a motorcycle club. Described as aggressive and hands-on, Vincent clashed with his father. Vincent was considered sensitive, which conflicted with Wayne's idea of how a boy should be.
Yeah, and that's an old school ideal of what a young boy should be, which is very, I think, a bad way to look at it, because they're sensitive people of all shapes and sizes and sexes. And when someone is sensitive like that,
but that doesn't make you less of a man, right?
No. In some situations, it will make you better suited to deal with any given situation. But it's just you can't force your kids to be the exact way you want them to be. Just having that expectation, you're already doing the wrong thing.
Well, again, I relate to this because my dad is very much like gruff and has a certain ideal of what a man's supposed to be. And I remember not only was my brother not allowed to read Harry Potter, but there were certain things my dad didn't want him to do.
Right.
Like play video games. It was like, you need to be out there hunting squirrels or, whatever. Because that's what a man does, I guess.
Well, that's what, but...
shoot innocent creatures.
But hunting has its place too.
Does.
But it's what it is, it's what I like to do.
It's what I like to do, so you need to do what I like to do.
Yes, and that's what it boils down to.
And I'm inflexible. I'm not going to do what... I'm not going to help. I'm not going to do something you like to do. We're just going to do what I like to do all the time.
Yeah.
Which is hunt and fish and work on cars.
It's trying to mold a little mini me. You see dads and moms do it, or parents do it.
I just don't understand that.
And you'll see them out and about. It's like they have the kid looks exactly like them. The kid's got the exact same style as mom or dad. And, I know sometimes the kids just want to be like their mom and dad, but sometimes you just get a feeling that that's all they're allowing. They're buying certain clothes for their children.
I mean, I had friends, even when I was in college, girlfriends that their mom would be snide about what they wore and would pick out clothes and be like, this is what you should be wearing.
And they're in college.
And they're adults. They're 18, 19, 20 years old. So I don't know. I guess it happens. So at age 10, Vincent confided in his cousin Morgan that he was gay. She was accepting of this information, but later Morgan and another church friend tried to get church leaders to counsel Vincent because he seemed, confused, unsure of himself, but they refused. Morgan recalled being told, quote, he is not gay, and it was never mentioned again.
Oh. That is one way you can approach that situation. I would not advise it.
The family described Vincent as being a sweet, loving boy who doted on his mother, especially when he was younger. Carol was a great cook and often hosted the family for holidays. They said Vincent would kind of hang on his mother as if they were attached at the hip. Like he was always very affectionate with her, arms around her, hugging her.
Probably stays close to her in a group of people kind of thing.
Wayne was close with his family who lived in Wilson, North Carolina, and Wayne would often spend weekends doing chores for his elderly mother and visiting with his family in Wilson, which is a bit further than Elizabeth City. I mean, Wilson's almost closer to Raleigh, so it's probably a few hours drive, from Norfolk. By the time Vincent entered Norview High School, his relationship with his parents had become fraught with conflict. Norview High School... We should talk about this high school, Dylan. At the time, it was considered diverse, yet many of the students lived in poverty. There was often gang violence spilling into the school, including weapons on the property, a lot of fights. Norfolk itself is an interesting area. Though Vincent grew up in what was considered a nice neighborhood on Bland Street, he was surrounded by areas considered poor with high crime. More than 1.8 million people call the Tidewater region of Hampton Roads home. The Navy's largest base in the world, Naval Station Norfolk, is located there, along with NATO's 2 strategic command headquarters. The Port of Virginia holds a large fleet of U.S. flag vessel ships. So the city itself is kind of split 50-50 with black and white residents. Many are transient members of the military. Norfolk is the kind of city where income disparity is prevalent. Like, you might be driving through what would be considered, like a well-to-do neighborhood. Then 2 blocks down, you're in the projects. The median income for a family of 4 is around $37,000.
Damn.
Yeah. Around 20% of the population lives below the poverty line. The city is no stranger to crime either, Dylan. Murder, rape, robberies, assaults, and auto theft is not uncommon in this area.
Well, and I think some of that comes with just pure population density. You know what I mean? You get so many people in an area, you're going to have some bad actors who try to prey on others. But it seems like an interesting mix, especially given the transient nature of some of the residents there, because they're going to bring with them their cultures, even from around the U.S. We talked about you can drive 2-3 hours to the north, south, east, west of where you're at right now and find a completely different kind of mindset in a community, right? They almost have their own slang. They have their own traditions, right? And cuisine can be quite different. And it's very interesting. You don't have to go very far to be in almost like another world.
It's true.
So with all those people coming into one area, I'm sure there's good positives and negatives about, people having all those differences.
Well, I've lived there. I've lived in Norfolk, and it is like this. I mean, it's just a very unique city. The neighborhood that I lived in was on the edge of this really fancy neighborhood with these gigantic houses that were on the water, probably, well over $1 million properties. And then we were just like a street behind that. And we were in these kind of what they would describe like shotgun houses.
Right.
Where they're kind of tall and narrow.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that in New Orleans.
Yeah. So there were a bunch of that. And historically, the neighborhood we lived in was African-American community. And from what I was told, most of the houses that were in that neighborhood were built in the very late 1800s, early 1900s. And they were the first homes built and purchased by freed slaves who often worked for those large homes a neighborhood over.
Right.
So it was, definitely you could see the difference in economics, right?
Well,
in this neighborhood, socioeconomic differences.
And I think areas where you have these income gaps, but they're living very close proximity to each other, because some areas it's very, certain people live who make a certain amount of money or have a certain amount of stuff. They live in one area kind of to themselves, you know what I'm saying? And then the nicer area, it's removed. But when you have it like a block by block situation, I think that can almost cause more problems, because you got the haves and have-nots right there looking at each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But, it was also a really wonderful neighborhood. I mean, like I said, it was a predominantly black neighborhood. We were one of 2, I guess, white households on the street, both, having been military. But what I enjoyed about it is just the sense of community in the neighborhood, because it was like families who had been there for generations. And definitely had maybe multi-generational households, and kind of everybody came together, friendly, almost like you got the block party going on. If somebody's having a cookout in the neighborhood or whatever, it's kind of like everybody just flocks over there to hang out. You might bring a beer and just stand around and talk to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a real sense of community that I did appreciate. So, I'm not trying to disparage Norfolk. It definitely has its good parts.
Well, no,
But I think it's important to recognize this duality of like Vincent, on one hand, he's like this smart, compassionate honor student who desperately wanted to earn his parents' approval. But then on the other hand, he felt like he had to hide his true identity as a homosexual. And I'm sure he felt the same way at high school. He probably had to put on a front at the high school where you had to be tough to survive.
and see, I think that's something that
And you couldn't really be yourself there.
When it's something that, okay, I think other people, even the people that are hetero, maybe be like, well, I know what that's like because I can't be myself around. I don't think you do know what this is like. It's such a big deal, and it's such a big part of who you really are. And I could not imagine having to act to that degree and hide my true self. How much internalizing and damage that would do to you emotionally. Because that must be a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, and as he got older, Vincent saw more of like other people's lives. Being an only child, Vincent didn't have the experience of seeing how siblings were treated in the home. He only knew his experience. So he grew resentful of his parents' expectations and punishments, like when he didn't meet them and he was punished. For example, Carol and Wayne often left an incredibly long list of chores for Vincent to complete after school, which he felt was just impossible to do. Like it would be so many chores, there's no way he could get them all done. Vincent was stuck between like wanting to please his parents, but also wanting to be his own person.
Yeah, and I'm all for kids doing chores and helping the household along, even from a young age. But sometimes it's like, if it's almost like a second job for your kid, or if you have an expectation that they should do so much stuff in the household that you have to do very little, I find that a bit strange. But I mean, it's everybody's own prerogative how they want to raise their kids.
I agree. I mean, I'm like, everyone should have chores, but I limit it to like maybe 2 chores a day. Like maybe you wash the dishes when you come home from school. And you vacuum the floor, and then the next day maybe you do your laundry. And
well, I personally think it's on the adult to bear the brunt of a household in the day to day.
And I feel the same way. And maybe this is a hot take, but if you have multiple children, like you have 3 or 4 kids, 5 kids, and you expect the older kid to constantly babysit their siblings, I don't agree with that. Because they didn't have these children. It's not their responsibility to always be the babysitter.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, no, I know we've discussed this before, and I know out of necessity that's going to happen some. But you'll see when they get, as the older they get, you just got to leave kids room to be a kid.
Yeah.
And be young. And if they haven't had, kids very young and stuff, they should be allowed to go with friends. You can't always expect them to put off things they would like to do just because of the household situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that can be a lot.
You the one who had all them kids.
And now
You take care of them.
I didn't have a lot of room growing up to be a kid, and maybe that's why I feel strongly about that. I don't know.
Well, no, maybe that's why we both feel strongly about that. I don't know. Vincent started rebelling in small ways, but he still felt repressed. Many of the freedoms he craved would just be seen as like basic teenage autonomy. Yet Vincent was denied these opportunities. Most high school kids get to hang out with friends after school, but Vincent wasn't allowed to do that. I'm sure Carol and Wayne thought they were protecting their son from bad elements and danger that they saw in their community.
Yeah, a lot of times this comes from a place of love and caring from the parents. They're just going about it in a kind of a counterproductive way. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they were thinking of the high school and that there are literal gangs roving the streets and going to the high school and bringing weapons and, probably selling drugs and committing petty crimes, that kind of thing. And they wanted to protect him and keep him from getting involved in that kind of stuff. But it also seems like maybe it just went a step too far with being strict. In an effort to have some semblance of social interaction beyond his family and church community, Vincent began to look for alternative ways of engaging with his peers. So he enjoyed spending time on social media and blogging about his life with his friends and followers. But his parents didn't put a lot of stock, in the internet. According to his parents, his time would have better been spent in prayer or volunteering at the church. In their minds, he was simply going through a phase that he would soon outgrow. So this enjoyment he finds on the internet is something that's just a phase.
Well, and I think there's very few young people who's going to be like, I think my parents are right. I should be volunteering at the soup kitchen or praying instead of being on the internet.
Right.
I mean, that's not going to happen.
Look, Mom, I just want to make dance videos. I just want to dance. What they didn't know was that from a relatively early age, their son knew he was gay. Fearing the backlash from his parents and community, Vincent hid that part of himself from most people that he knew. But eventually, he did let a select few trusted close friends and family members know that he was gay. But he avoided documenting details about his sexuality to prevent word from reaching his parents. So even if he was telling them he was gay, he also was pretty secretive with it because, again, he doesn't really know how to tell his parents. When he was struggling with being gay in a tight-knit Christian community, Vincent tended to express his anxiety through the lens of a typical teenage boy. His social media posts concerning issues with his parents were mostly focused on things like being forced to do homework or getting grounded for staying out past curfew. The little blogs he would write would be about, my mom and dad are really strict and they won't let me out of the house until my homework is done.
Right.
In a vacuum, none of that seems like a problem. Most teenagers get into trouble on occasion, and sometimes that includes being grounded or losing privileges. We've all had that happen. For example, Dylan, he had completed like a questionnaire. Do you remember on social media those questionnaires would circulate?
Yeah.
It'd be like 50 questions about you type of thing. Well, on one of those, he was asked what crime deserves the death penalty, and his response was kind of what you might think of a fairly standard kind of edgy teen sarcastic answer. It was, making your son do chores.
Oh, snap.
The real trouble at home reached a breaking point in 2013. According to his cousin Morgan, to whom he had already revealed his true sexual identity, he decided it was finally time to let his parents know that he was gay. This didn't go over well with the Baptist couple, as you can imagine, and tensions within the family skyrocketed. Wayne, who had always operated a bit more freely with physical punishments, grew increasingly abusive. Vincent's father felt that being gay made the boy a, quote, sissy.
Yeah, because that's how gay works.
And Carol shared her own family's perspective that homosexuality was an aberration against God. Wayne would verbally berate his son, as well as calling him derogatory slurs like, and I'm only saying this
Well, I
to
think
prove
we
a
could all
point.
guess.
Well, one of them is a fruitcake.
Oh, fruitcake?
When we can guess what the others are, right?
Yeah.
The pair had never really gotten along, Vincent and his father, but with this news, the situation worsened. In an act of rebellion, one day after school, Vincent snatched his mother's keys and took the car on a joyride. Now, he didn't have any money with him and eventually ran out of gas. Realizing he was about to be in a world of hurt, Dylan, Vincent fabricated a story that he had been kidnapped.
Oh, yeah, they kidnapped me in the car and they just drove and drove until it ran out of gas.
Did he get kidnapped by Kramer? Remember that episode where Kramer's like, just drive until they run out? He tossed Carol's keys into the woods, then called the police. Wayne and Carol were in dismay when it was discovered their son had lied about the whole thing. And I think most parents would feel that way. Like, if you lied, got the police involved.
Well, yeah.
I think any kid that did that would probably be in trouble. This breach of trust seemed to do a number on the family. Afterwards, Wayne and Carol seemed even more emotionally distant from their son. Cousin Morgan described the parents like ignoring him, like basically giving him the silent treatment. Like, she remembered Carol and Vincent arriving for church and Carol kind of going and sitting wherever and just sort of ignoring Vincent.
That's odd. That's something you would notice.
On December 19th of 2013, Vincent left school early. Carol wasn't expecting him. This allowed him to catch her by surprise as she came out of the upstairs bathroom. Vincent used pepper spray to subdue his mother and then proceeded to attack her with a metal baseball bat.
Damn.
Once she was fully incapacitated, he retrieved a crowbar from the garage, using it to stab his mother in the eye.
Oh my God.
He continued to beat her until she stopped breathing. All in all, Vincent smashed and stabbed Carol 25 times throughout this blitz attack. After killing his mother, Vincent stole her car and drove around the neighborhood to waste a few hours until Wayne arrived. Wayne was a large and imposing man, so killing him wouldn't be as easy as it was with Carol. The only chance Vincent had of overpowering his father was catching him off guard. When Wayne got home from work, he discovered his wife's lifeless body. Before he could call for help, Vincent ambushed him with a crowbar, stabbing him and beating him within an inch of his life. To ensure maximum damage, Vincent used a variety of weapons, including 5 different knives during the attack. The ferocity of the murder was incomprehensible. Carol's body, she was described as being completely unrecognizable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and it shows the rage he had built up inside of him, right?
I mean, yeah, tragically. Yet Wayne didn't die immediately. He was able to call emergency services, and while Carol was already dead by the time they arrived, he managed to survive the trip to the hospital. While Wayne succumbed to his injuries not long after being wheeled into the emergency room, he was conscious long enough to tell authorities that his son Vincent was the culprit. After attacking Wayne, Vincent went to the police station, reporting that he had been attacked by his father Wayne.
So he's pleading self-defense.
Seems to be the case.
Damn.
But because Wayne accused Vincent of the attacks before dying, the police immediately brought the boy in for questioning. During the interview, Vincent confessed to killing both his mother and father. The methods he claimed to use to assault and murder his parents lined up with the autopsy reports, leaving little doubt that he was the person responsible for these heinous crimes. Following the interview, he was officially arrested for the murders of both Wayne and Carol. His DNA would be found on the crowbar and baseball bat that was used to attack his parents, leading to him being charged with their murders. When asked why he had killed his parents, Vincent told police he was angry about, quote, his dad taking away my iPod and stuff.
It's not a good reason to murder your parents, bud.
Yeah, you don't need the iPod that badly.
No.
Just sing a song in your head.
God, I was on his side, man, until he did this. Because this is a lot. It's brutal.
I know. I mean, it's a case where you kind of feel torn because he is young.
Right.
And he's, his brain's not fully developed. And maybe he felt hopeless or this was the only way out. But at the same time, bro, this is horrible what you did.
Yeah, no, it's terrible.
When word spread that Vincent Parker had murdered his parents, the community was stunned. Vincent's school friends were in disbelief. I mean, sure, he had made comments sometimes that he hated his dad or he didn't like doing chores at home, but so did everyone else.
Right.
I mean, what kid doesn't go to school sometimes and say, I hate my parents? No one had taken those words seriously, and no one expected Vincent to snap. It was just completely out of character for the young man. There was nothing in Vincent's character or background that could have predicted the kind of rage he'd taken out on his parents. The trial against Vincent Parker for the murders of Wayne and Carol began in May of 2014. Since he was only 2 years shy of being 18 years old, the prosecution decided to charge him as an adult. He ended up pleading guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder, and the judge signed off on the guilty plea. In September of that year, Vincent was sentenced to 40 years imprisonment, but part of that sentence was suspended with a stipulation that he would be held in a juvenile prison until the age of 21. After turning 21, he would be transferred to a regular, adult prison, where he would serve out the remainder of his sentence for 21 years and 10 months.
Damn.
Based on an out-of-context statement from Vincent's police interview, the media widely reported that his primary motive for the murder of his parents was just because they took away the iPod. But the truth is far more nuanced and complicated than that. A combination of abuse, long-term personal oppression, and an inability on Vincent's part to handle his responsibilities led to the tragic murder of his parents. Experts who study parricide agree that the majority of children who kill their parents are abused. The child often feels they are in a hopeless situation. Vincent had been living this double life for years and knew he would never fully be accepted by Wayne, even if Carol had kind of softened a bit to the idea that her son was gay. Vincent had only ever known his parents. I mean, they were his world, if you think about it, being an only child and being so insulated. He felt conflicted growing up in this staunch Christian household and likely had trouble reconciling who he was. So that, coupled with abuse, was what psychologists think was a recipe for disaster.
Well, yeah, and him viewing his parents as kind of the ultimate authority in his life. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't see outside of that. He doesn't see a life outside of their control, or hey, I'm almost 18, you know, this won't be much longer. I can, you know, get a job and get my own place, kind of thing. So that was a recipe for disaster.
Well, I think often as adults, we forget what it's like to be that age because things seem so permanent when you're 14, 15, 16 years old. You have a hard time wrapping your head around, like, this is temporary, and one day you'll be an adult, and you'll be grown, and you'll be out of school. I mean, I remember those feelings of like, oh my gosh, this is just my life.
Right.
Of being like bullied by the redneck girls who are calling me a hippie, even though that's not the subgenre I'm part of, and wanting to beat me up because I'm wearing Doc Martens.
Right. Make it make sense.
Like, this is just my life forever. I'm going to be 45 years old and still be bullied by girls with big hair.
Well, and that's why those things in high school and middle school seem like such a big deal.
Yeah.
Because you have that mindset.
Yeah, and you're immature. And again, this is your whole world. Like, you've never known a world outside of this.
Well, damn. So he probably, he's so young he could get out of jail, right? I mean, yeah.
Well, he'll serve 21. I mean, yeah, he'll get out. He'll get out eventually.
Yeah, he could be out in his mid-40s.
Despite being a diligent student, Vincent was incredibly sheltered and lacked many basic life experiences to develop into a well-rounded individual. If he'd been given more opportunities to maybe learn how the real world works, he might not have resorted to murder as a way to deal with his problems. The biggest issue between Vincent and his parents was his sexuality. Even before they were made aware of the fact that he was gay, there was tension within the household from him feeling like he needed to hide the truth from them. Wayne and Carol never made it secret that they didn't approve of homosexuality, and they firmly believed that being gay was, quote, unnatural and evil. Vincent going through every day while grappling with the idea that his parents fundamentally disapproved of a core aspect of him, I mean, that can't be easy.
No.
He also knew that they wouldn't change their point of view since it was so deeply ingrained in their belief system. Vincent's framing of his crimes as being due to relatively mundane conflicts with his parents might have been an attempt to avoid having to admit publicly that he was gay. And while his parents were obviously the biggest influence in his life, when it came to whether or not he revealed his sexuality, Vincent was still mostly kind of couched in a community that looked down on homosexuality, frequently describing gay people as sinners. He could have possibly used it to defend himself, but having grown up in an area where such an attitude was pervasive, he felt that it was better to simply let the authorities think that he'd killed his parents for, like, taking away his iPod.
Damn. That's wild.
Well, at the end of the day, Vincent's childhood and lack of life experiences were going to cause him problems as he entered adulthood, regardless of whether he killed anyone or not. The moment he faced conflict outside of the home, he would have been unable to navigate the situation in a manner that most people his age probably would have learned. It just doesn't seem to me that Vincent had a lot of coping mechanisms and strategies to deal with the reality of family life, or maybe even just kind of life in general. He saw committing murder as a reasonable response to his problems. And that's kind of a failure in the way that he was raised, just as much as it was a failure on his part to find a healthy solution to the situation.
Well, yes, and this is one of the main reasons that you do not try to control every move your children make and all that, and control their environment completely their entire childhood, is because you've missed opportunities to learn lessons, to get new tools in your emotional toolbox to deal with stuff. You shouldn't. That's no different than the parents that swoop in and fix every problem their kid ever has, right? Always there to bail them out of trouble. Always there to, have money to, pay for whatever damages to keep them from suffering consequences.
Some kind of enabling
of their actions.
Yeah.
Because this is all chances to learn, opportunities to learn things in life.
Parenting is just so damn hard.
Well, it is.
It's like how do you know what is the right choice or what is the right way to rear your children?
Well, the way I see it is, even if you didn't do a perfect job, I didn't do a perfect job parenting.
Are you sure?
By far, yes.
You seem like a perfect parent, Dylan.
That's not true. But if you tried your hardest and did what you thought was best, for the most part, we're all human. There's sometimes we don't do the right thing and stuff. But if you tried your best, did what you thought was best, and tried your hardest, that's really all you can ask of someone.
It's true. Vincent was held in a juvenile detention facility until 2020, and that's when he turned 21. He was transferred to a maximum security prison in Virginia, where he's set to carry out the rest of his sentence. So it'll be late 2041 or like early 2042 before he's released. And Dylan, he will be around 42 years old.
Damn, I can math, y'all.
Due to having committed murder so young, and even with a fairly lengthy sentence, Vincent will have a chance to spend plenty of time as a free man, after completing the stint in prison. He will still be about a decade or more younger than his parents were when he killed them.
Damn.
Yeah. Now, in the aftermath, Vincent's family was divided on their opinions. Some members wept openly in court. Others, such as his uncle Tony Taylor, showed little understanding for the teen. After testifying, Taylor lunged at Vincent, who was seated in the courtroom. He had to be restrained by law enforcement. Vincent had been stoic through most of the hearing, but when a 911 tape was played of Wayne in his final moments, the boy just broke down and started sobbing. His uncle Tony felt it was a manipulation tactic to gain sympathy and described Vincent as, quote, a chameleon.
Oh.
Vincent's grandfather, Alan Taylor, said, quote, I want him to get some type of counseling, help him grow and be an understanding man, be sorry for what he did do. Alan said, quote, we have to give it to God. He also said that he had forgiven his grandson and loved him. Gloria Parker, Wayne's mother, said, quote, only God can heal, but I do not hate my grandson. I love him.
Wow.
Vincent's supporters say he was set up for failure his whole life, that homosexuality in the Black community is a multifaceted issue. There has been a history of homophobia within that community, but now there's a more evolving acceptance. So the intersectionality of being a minority and gay, Vincent likely felt he faced unique challenges. And since he was limited to interactions with the outside world, he probably didn't realize there was a growing acceptance and visibility for the LGBTQ identities in the Black community. The church historically held a significant influence, and some traditional interpretations of religious texts have led to homophobia. Vincent's parents and religious beliefs were in conflict with his identity. I mean, being a teenager is hard. We all know this.
So he's Black?
Yeah.
What? Well, that really does add a whole nother layer, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did not know that.
Because, I mean, not only is he dealing with being a minority racially, but also he's a minority and he's gay, so he probably feels very marginalized.
Right. Even inside of his own community.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I did watch a documentary for this case, or like a show. It was called Teens Who Kill, Season 1, Episode 10. And there you get a lot of I got a lot of input from psychologists and social workers, who I guess have kind of examined Vincent's case. And then I also used a great deal of newspaper articles. Since this was a relatively modern case, there's a lot of news reports.
Okay. Wow. What a tragic case.
It is a very tragic case, and I don't know what the answer is here, and it's like you don't want to blame his parents because they were doing what they thought was right.
Right. Even if it was heavy-handed in some instances.
Yeah. But also, you have this young man who's probably got all these feelings.
Well, you should be the last person that makes your child feel hopeless in any regard. So if that's happening, even if you don't know it or agree completely that's the situation, if they feel that way, that's what's happening. There's no way around it,
Yeah.
And you have to figure something else out.
Well, Dylan, thank you for sitting down with me to discuss the case of Vincent Parker.
Well, thank you for having me. And thank you, Michelle, for supporting this week's episode on Patreon. We appreciate you. Welcome.
Well, we are coming up on Pride Month in June.
We are.
And so I thought, it's a good time to showcase, maybe an LGBTQ related case.
Good job. Good job. And yeah. All right. So until next time, right?
Yeah, we'll be back with a midweek.
We'll be back
very soon.
In the middle of the week.
We hope you have a lovely week.
I hope you enjoyed a long weekend over this Memorial Day.
All
right. Yeah.
All right, Dylan.
All right, until next time.
Peace out.
Bye.
Peace out, Shawty.